Hey, it's Mazzy here. Welcome back to the channel. This is a little different, but it is a ranking, but it's a regional ranking, and it's a little bit of my personal history and the love-hate relationship I have with Los Angeles. And there's always been a rivalry between the Bay Area, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, Southern California. A lot of it has to do with baseball. A lot of it has to do when the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York um, Giants moved to the West Coast and established teams on the West Coast. Luckily, they're both in the National League because we all know that the American League is the junior league and doesn't count. But we got the San Francisco Giants. In LA, they built a stadium for the Dodgers. They knocked down the homes of a lot of migrant workers in Chavez Ravine and built Dodger Stadium. San Francisco built a stadium, ill-conceived location with a lot of wind factors, Candlestick Park, um, in the southern part of the city off of Highway 101. Well, that's a whole other story. But I was a baseball fan as a kid, and I was a Giants fan with Willie Mays and Matty Alou, Felipe Alou, Jim Davenport, Juan Marichal, Willie McCovey, all those that great uh, team of San Francisco Giants. And there was that rivalry. The other rivalry is about water rights, and LA is more of a dry, arid, natural. That's the natural topography and geography thing down there, and a lot of the water from the north goes down to the south. But okay, I love LA. 1962, August of 62, my parents take a road trip. First time I ever went to Disneyland, 1962. And I remember that so vividly. It was so exciting. Disneyland, SeaWorld, down to San Diego to actually Marine World. And then I think we went to Knott's Berry Farm. And I don't know if we went to SeaWorld on that trip. I'm not quite sure if it was open yet. But we did the San Diego, LA thing because my mother never flew in an airplane in her entire life, and we would take road trips. But I remember it was August, and I remember the specific moment, being in the car, driving through Hollywood. We went to what was called Grauman's Chinese Theater then, home of the stars, the Hollywood Walk, and hearing on the radio that Marilyn Monroe died. That's why I can pinpoint the exact date. Was that August 2nd? Anyway, it was August at some point in 1962. And over the years, I've probably been to Los Angeles literally hundreds of times. When I worked in the record business in the 70s for ABC Records, we would fly down for our corporate office events down there. Went to see Paul McCartney Wings tour at the Forum. I saw the San Francisco shows, went to LA for that. Went with my girlfriend. We drive down to LA and do all the LA things because I like LA, but it's one of those places I love visiting for like a week, but I would never want to live there. But I know how special it is. And it's really a company town. I mean, it's the movie industry and the music industry. And, it's shifted over the last decade plus with a lot of TV shows, last 25 years, being shot in Vancouver and other places like Georgia and just around the world, more location things. But it's still a center of television and motion picture. And there's a certain excitement there. And you can see celebrities, you can see locations that films were shot. You can see the great Capitol Records Tower and everything else. And plus I went every year, 4 times a year when I was had my own photo agency because 3 of my photographers were based down there. I'd go to photo shoots all the time, plus the ad agency showing portfolios. That's the intro. Now you can start your clocks. I'm showcasing 20 albums that I really love from LA groups or LA recorded records. Now, whenever you do these kind of ranking videos, some people say you shouldn't even rank them because it's hard to compare and rank records, and it's like a competition. It shouldn't be a competition in music, but people enjoy them. So I'm going to indulge you all and rank these. And this is based on my personal taste at the moment, and it's pretty consistent with these records. There are a few records here that I couldn't listen to literally for decades because they were so big and so popular. But I'll talk about what I like about them and about my experience listening to these records. Also, I realized, late 70s, the punk thing happened. And I didn't like a lot of punk albums in the late 70s, especially at least the ones from the California groups, San Francisco and LA groups, until X and that's a 1980 record. I would have put X Los Angeles on this list, but it's 1980. I did see a lot of the hardcore punk bands and other bands in San Francisco, at the Mabuhay Gardens, LA, Madame Wong's, and in the Chinatown area. But I'd go down there and see music too. But there were more singles things for me. The British bands, obviously, The Clash and The Damned and the Sex Pistols, I think they were better at albums than the American groups at that time, aside from the Ramones, and that's East Coast. So I'm giving you all these exceptions and all these reasons why I didn't include some albums. And I know you're all going to have records that you're going to say, Maslov, you forgot this record. Now, it's true, I might have forgotten an album, but maybe I just didn't include it because these are my 20. So I'm starting with number 20, going up to number 1. Number 20 is an album that just epitomizes Los Angeles in the 1970s, and it's a very different album for this artist. And this is Tim Buckley's Greeting from LA. That is literally what LA looked like. You always would go down there and see this sort of brown, horizon there, until gas additives, and they started taking it seriously, clean air, pollution. So people who don't believe in pollution and climate change are absolutely wrong. I'd go down there in the 60s and 70s. My eyes would literally burn when I walked off the plane or got out of a car. And this is an actual unretouched photograph. Greetings from LA. This is the pop-out cover. Now, what's great about this album, I absolutely love this album, especially side 1. Tim Buckley is the folk artist, a crossover, a little bit of freak folk. Really interesting, obviously, father of Jeff Buckley, and both father and son really unfortunately lost their lives at an early age. Unfortunate. But side 1 on this is one of the funkiest blue-eyed freak folk records ever. This kicks ass. I always tell people, if you see this record, especially with the postcard intact, because it's a pop-out unipack, and you can see you can actually pull it out and mail it to your best friend. This side 1, Move With Me, Get On Top, and Sweet Surrender. Now, 3 songs, long songs that have funky bass, guitar, riff. He's like screaming like a banshee sometimes. It's a sexy, just assault, and it's really a wonderful record. It's not like any of his other records that are more sort of in the mellow, I wouldn't say avant-garde, but a little more ethereal out there folk. It's not traditional folk music, really. Number 20, the great album by Tim Buckley, Greetings from LA. Coming in at number 19 is The Byrds Untitled from 1970. This is the last incarnation of the Byrds. And there are people that say that's not the real Byrds. It's, you don't have Gene Clark and David Crosby and Chris Hillman, but you have a great next generation of the Byrds. You got probably the best instrumentalists in the group. You still have Roger McGuinn with that great kind of tenor voice and that great soaring 12-string Rickenbacker guitar. You got the great lead and acoustic guitar and electric guitar of Clarence White, one of the great newgrass crossover players that played with the Byrds as a guest originally on Sweetheart of the Rodeo, but just a killer. What's great about this, there's one jam record, one live record that has like an 18-minute version or so of 8 Miles High. So they could have gone on to become a good kind of rock jam band like the Allman Brothers or the Grateful Dead, but they were tight. They're great. They could do their core songs and cross over into the country realm. This was actually a pretty successful album for them. But the studio version, the studio LP on this is amazing because on side 3, it includes one of the best songs the Byrds ever recorded. And one of the best songs on record is their great song, Chestnut Mare, with the floating acoustic guitars of Clarence White, the great vocals, ethereal at times, of Roger McGuinn. Fantastic record, some country rock at its finest, really well recorded. The Byrds, produced by Terry Melcher from 1970, Untitled. Coming at number 18. I just watched the documentary, and I highly recommend the documentary on the Beach Boys. It's on Disney+. Really well done. And I thought you could get through the whole thing, and I was so excited because there was no mention of Kokomo. And I was so excited. There's no mention of Kokomo. I hate that song. But after the final live bit, during the credits, they play Kokomo. So, oh my God. But I wanted to showcase this album. The only solo album from 1977, the only solo album that Dennis Wilson, really the hippie of the band in essence, and this kind of crosses over with talking about Terry Melcher. They were friends, and he actually introduced Charlie Manson to Terry Melcher. Can't blame him. Who knew? Manson wanted to be a songwriter. But what's great about this, I mean, Wilson was going through a lot of drug and alcohol related situations, and his voice is a little hoarse on this. And I think that's the beauty of this record, because you got some lush Beach Boy like harmonies on here. I think Bruce Johnson's on here, a lot of guests on here, but recorded at their own studio, the Brothers Studio in 1976. Well, actually, going back to even 1974, piecing it together. But there's a certain grittiness, funkiness to this. If you can imagine Beach Boys music being a little funkier, this probably bests any of the Beach Boy albums they were doing at the time. Of course, you know, once Brian was not involved, they got a little saccharine-like. A little. Beach Boy album Holland is, to me, an amazing album, but it was recorded in Holland, so I'm kind of making my own rules here, not including that because it wasn't recorded or really a part of Los Angeles. The one before that, Surf's Up, could have been there, but I opted for this album. It's got a really wonderful mix. The opening track, this is my original promo copy here. It's got a great track. First of all, here's the gatefold. Tragically, you know, he died in the 80s. He drowned. I mean, a Beach Boy drowning, God. But the opening track on here is River Song, is so lush and so beautiful. But again, there's a little bit of a funkiness in here. Of course, You and I is a lovely, lovely song. So I just love this album. Fantastic record, coming in number 18. Coming at number 17 from 1975 is the debut solo album by Emmylou Harris. This is such a beautiful record. Of course, Graham Parsons really kind of pulled her out of the clubs, and she does those beautiful harmony things on the first two Graham Parsons album. I almost included Grievous Angel. It just didn't fit in this LA thing for me. I don't even know if it was recorded in Los Angeles, to come to think of it. But this record is LA recording. This is a beautiful record produced by Brian Aaron. You got Glendy Harding on it, James Burton, who I would see tour with the Hot Band, her band, in clubs when this album came out. There's a cover of For No One, the Lennon-McCartney song. There's covers of Sleepless Nights and Bottle Let Me Down, the Merle Haggard song, Coat of Many Colors by Dolly Parton. Queen of the Silver Dollar, Shel Silverstein. I can go on and on. Of course, you do have the beautiful song she co-wrote From Boulder to Birmingham, a stunningly beautiful song. It means a lot too, socially and politically. Billy Sherrill song, Too Far Gone. Beautiful harmonies, beautiful arrangements. Coming number 17, Emmylou Harris. 16, Apostrophe. This is probably, up until this point, his biggest selling album, his most commercial album, strictly commercial. It's a great record. Again, especially side one. Side two is great, but during, this is, I think, the first Zappa-related release that came out during my record store days, 74. So this is 50 years old now. And side one, we used to play in the store all the time. And it was, in fact, this is my copy, which still has my Warehouse Records sticker on it. I don't know why this one still has the shrink, but it does. Of course, you have Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, Nanak Rubs It, St. Alfonso's, Pancake Breakfast. Entire side one really flows together like a sweet, hysterical, funny, biting, great guitar work, great arrangement work. I mean, side two is nice too. But Jim Gordon on here, Angie Dunbar, George Duke. I mean, it's got a ton of musicians and people contributing to this album. So coming number 16, Apostrophe. If you don't have an album and you don't quite get Zapp or the Mothers, I think this is one that you could latch onto. A very LA recording. Coming in at number 15 is Ladies in the Canyon by Joni Mitchell. It's not her most popular record, but I think it's possibly her best record. Of course, a lot of the critics and a lot of people love Blue. That's the one with California. Beautiful record. I mean, The thing is, again, I could not necessarily say this is her best record, but this is the one that speaks to me in the moment right now. Court and Spark is her biggest selling record. That's 76, I believe, with her hits where she really crossed over and broke out. What I love about this, this is like some of the best songwriting. I like her playing on this record, her own cover art that she does on a lot of her records, because you have Ladies of the Canyon, which is a beautiful song. You have a Big Yellow Taxi, which is, to me, critical of the time. They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Really great. On the live album, Miles of Isles, she does an amazing version, a rockin' version of that. And you got her original, or at least her song, Woodstock, that most people would hear because of Crosby, Stills and Nash's version of it. And you have the version here, her wonderful song, Circle Game. This song is such a perfect song, and I just showcased it on a It's the Music Stupid episode, the Tom Rush title of his album from 1968 called Circle Game. But it took until this album for her to record the record herself. Lyrics inside, great album by Joni Mitchell, coming at number 15. Coming number 14, probably an album that is a great, wonderfully produced record, huge hit, one of the biggest albums of the 1970s, produced impeccably, a record of its time, and showcases the excesses of rock and roll and record business, and cocaine in the studio and all the things. But you can't deny how great Hotel California is by the Eagles. This is 1976, this album. I remember still, my flashback memory is going to a party up in San Rafael, being in the back of the car with 4 people in the car, and they had a cassette of this in the car. And the harmonies, the speakers were behind me on the back ledge of the car, and I kind of closed my eyes. I was not stoned, but I would close my eyes and hearing the harmonies of New Kid in Town. I just loved those vocals. Now, I like this too because Joe Walsh kind of is added to the band and adds a bite to it. So it gets I like country rock, and I do like the Eagles, but there was such a backlash for some people because it showed the excesses of LA and Hollywood and record making. But this is a great sounding record. It's a beautiful record. The opening track, the way it's recorded, of Hotel California, again, it really showcases this great, what was happening in Los Angeles in the 70s. Obviously, we had in the late 60s Laurel Canyon, and the whole LA scene was so incestuous. A lot of these artists were crossing over on each other's albums. Joni would play with Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris, and they'd play with Jackson Browne and Warren Zevon and Fleetwood Mac and everything. This is actually taken at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the cover shot, and they kind of call it Hotel California. But every song on here, you talk about a song of the times. There were lines on the mirror, lines on her face, life in the fast lane. So coming in at number 14 is Hotel California, the Eagles. Coming in number 13 is a Fleetwood Mac album. And I was thinking about this, and of course the obvious choice is Rumors. But Rumors, 80%, 90% of Rumors was recorded in the Bay Area, recorded at the record plant in Sausalito. And so that is kind of one reason I didn't do it. It was like, piles of cocaine and hot tubs in Sausalito, California. Yes, they did overdubs and things later. I could have picked Fleetwood Mac's self-titled record, 1975. Keith Olsen produced, fantastic record. It's the one that all of a sudden people realized there was a band called Fleetwood Mac, right? By adding a couple of California residents, it became a California band, even though they're all Brits. But to me, I want to include Tusk. And this is the follow-up to Rumors. This is 1979, so it just kind of makes it into the wire in the 1970s. I love this record. This is a double album. This is a record that didn't do as well as they thought of. Now, of course, the single Tusk with the, was it the UCLA marching band on it? I think this is a genius of an album. I mean, in a way, this is Lindsey Buckingham really pushing just the excess of things and taking control of, like, 60, 70, 80% of this record, but everyone has great songs on here. Really well recorded, almost on the avant-garde side at times. Obviously now it doesn't seem so strange, but to a lot of people, this album, this double album, seemed so over the top, and so Rumors was, again, like Eagles, Hotel California, and Frampton Comes Alive, probably one of the three biggest albums of the 1970s. That excess of the record industry at the time. But this is an incredible record. This is, everything when it's a double album and there's a lot of excess and people say, oh, it should be pared down to a single album, like the White Album should. People compare this to the White Album, and it is their White Album. It's a fantastic album, coming at number 14. Coming number 13, I guess, Tusk. Coming in at number 12, Little Feats Don't Fail Me Now. I couldn't do a Best of Los Angeles 70s without including Little Feat. Their entire output pretty much was 1970s. What was the first album? 69, right around that time. But obviously the Lowell George and Bill Payne, and one of the incredible bands, the tightest bands. Of course, their live record, Waiting for Columbus, is an amazing record. I didn't want to include a live album. On here you have guests of Emmylou Harris and Bonnie Raitt, background vocals. But Lowell George's songwriting is so good and so tight. There's a swampy sort of southern soul, even though they're an LA band. Lowell George sort of was in The Mothers of Invention for a minute or so. You have Rock and Roll Doctor on here, one of the great songs ever written, Oh Atlanta. Listen to the live version of that on the Columbus album. But even here, it's so tight and so good. Spanish Moon. Nothing bad on this album. No clunkers on most of their albums. Great songwriting. Again, a little of that swampy booginess to it, but really great musicianship, the great bottleneck guitar playing of Lowell George. Feats Don't Fail Me Now, number 12 on this list of great LA records. Coming number 11, someone's going to say, Ry Cooder better than Hotel California? Are you insane, Maslov? Maybe. I like this record better. It's nowhere near the sales output of Hotel California. It's not as accessible like a Hotel California, but this is my list. You're watching my list. Paradise and Lunch, the great Ry Cooder album, again, from 1974, so another album that's celebrating 50 years. Ry Cooder's always been this great artist. Some people just cite him as a great session musician and don't love his voice, maybe. I think his voice is really interesting in that bluesy, folky style. His great guitar playing. I mean, he can play. He's my favorite stringed instrument player, my favorite guitar player. Is he the best? I mean, that's subjective, right? It's taste. He is my favorite. I love his bottleneck playing. He taught Keith Richard how to play bottleneck. He helped George Harrison. A lot of other artists as well. There's some great songs on here. You got Tamp 'Em Up Solid, the way it opens up, with these wonderful background singers, Bobby King and Gene Mumford. Diddy Wah Diddy is maybe my favorite piece on here. It's an old jazzy, bluesy song. And he's got Earl Hines on her. Earl Father Hines, a great kind of jazz piano player. Ry Cooder, this is number 11. So now we're in the top 10. Here we go. Good Old Boys by Randy Newman. This is, to me, a perfect album. Now, I usually am partial to Sail Away. I think that is my favorite Randy Newman album. But this, to me, is... it's a politically charged album, historically, some historical... stories in here, his songwriting. Now, he would spend summers in New Orleans, family in New Orleans. So that's why you get some of this vibe, the swampiness of vibe. But what a great songwriter. He has the funniest take on things. Now, I could have picked I Love LA, which would fit right into the wheelhouse of this particular video, but I think this is amazing. The opening song, Rednecks, is a record that is hard to be played on the radio today because of the use of the N-word in that song. But this is from the point of the Rednecks, and it actually is important in telling the story that Randy writes about in the song Rednecks on here. You have a beautiful song, Marie, Birmingham, but a song that really was revitalized in 2005. This album came out in 74, again, another 50th anniversary record. It's kind of a coincidence, 1974. But the song on here, Louisiana 1927, that song was pretty much revived and used and played a lot, including by Randy Newman after 2005 floods in New Orleans, Katrina, what happened there. And this is about the floods in Louisiana in 1927. Naked Man on here is covered by a lot of other people too, but an incredible album. Number 10, L.A. Number 9, I think the epitome of L.A. and someone who writes a lot of wonderful melancholy music here. And I was thinking about this as I proceed with this video. I think there's a lot of people in the audience that just don't like the excess of some of these records from Los Angeles this period. They think it's not as gritty, it's not as punk, it's not as organic, it's not real. But these are real writers doing things. Yeah, they wanted to go to Hollywood and wanted to go to LA to get famous like movie stars. But that's where the record scene was. The 70s in Los Angeles, the record industry, I know industry, but the record business was bigger than the movie business. You drive down Sunset Boulevard in the 70s into the 80s, the billboards were not blockbuster movies. They were billboards of record albums that came out on the Hollywood Strip, Sunset Strip. But this, to me, is the great Jackson Browne album. Again, 1974. What a great year for L.A. music and that really kind of really perfect recordings to a point. Jackson Browne doesn't have that perfect voice. That's what I like about it. That's why I really like him more than the Eagles, because the Eagles had those perfect harmonies, whether you like Don Henley and Glenn Frey and everyone there. He's got an unusual voice, but this is a melancholy record. This is, to me, his best record. This is Late for the Sky. The great David Lindley, his touring band at the time, is all over this record. Less session musicians of the day, but David Lindley, electric guitar, slide guitar, fiddle. What a great musician in his own right, definitely. I think we lost him a few years ago. One of the great things on this record is on the song The Late Show, which there's two bits of, there's this beat that they use the closing, the slamming of an old car door. And there's something about that. Every time I hear it, I'm waiting for those car doors to slam. And it really kind of fits in with the song. But Late for the Sky, Fountains of Sorrow, For a Dancer, Before the Deluge, a personal record. Someone going through some issues at the time. He hadn't had a huge breakout hit. Of course, Eagles were covering his songs, and him and I think J.D. Souther and one of the Eagles were living together prior to this, or just up to this point. But this is a fantastic album. Jackson Browne coming in at number 9. Coming in number 8, a record, again, that totally bombed. And you know something? This record came out in 1974. I didn't do this on purpose, and this is No Other by Gene Clark. This is a record that David Geffen had a problem with. Only 8 songs, only 6 songs, And this is an unusual album. Of course, Gene Clark, one of the original members of the Byrds, leaves right as 8 Miles High is coming out, Afraid of Flying, which is really unfortunate. He was the first songwriter in the Byrds, because they were covering Dylan and other folk songs. But he was the songwriter, and he had sort of a tempestuous life to a point, with alcohol and drugs too, but made some great folk rock records, his album with the Gosden Brothers, and just wonderful records. Look at him. He's like all glammed out there in 1974. Thomas Jefferson Kay produced this album. It's a dirgy album. It's rock. It's kind of spooky album, but this album has grown in stature and has become a huge cult favorite. Gene Clark. Number 7, from Gainesville, Florida, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. This is the big breakout album. I worked on his first 2 records at ABC Records. He gets a contract, MCA buys ABC Records, and Jimmy Iovine comes in and produces this, co-produces with Tom Petty, I believe, and with the great engineering of Shelley Yakis, one of the great audio engineers of the time. Of course, Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, You Don't Do Me Like That. 3 songs right there that were huge hits for Tom Petty. A great sounding record, a great rock and roll record with that Roger McGuinn-like bird vocal, little Dylan thrown in there. One of the greatest bands, him and the Heartbreakers, until unfortunately his early demise a few years ago, his death. Uh, every record he made was good, some greater than others, but it's interesting. A lot of people, I think, take Tom Petty for granted, and this has a very LA sound. He really got entrenched in the whole Hollywood and LA thing, and is basically a part of the success of this record is being in Los Angeles at the time. Could it happen somewhere else in New York or Chicago or Minneapolis? Who knows? Probably not in San Francisco, but what a great, great record. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and this is Damn the Torpedoes from, what year was this? 1979. So it just makes it under the gun. Coming at number 6, you know what year this came out? 1974. The breakout album of Linda Ronstadt, Heart Like a Wheel. What a great record this is. She gets signed to Asylum after her Capitol records, but she puts out Don't Cry Now in Asylum, but she owes one more record. So she has to do, after that Asylum record, she has to go back and do one more record she owes to Capitol. This comes out, and it's huge. I'm surprised Capitol even decided to push it. This was massive. This made her the biggest star, the biggest female recording artist of the 1970s. And this is a wonderful record. You're No Good on this, and you have that amazing lead guitar solo by Andrew Gold. What a perfect solo. A solo that Linda Ronstadt didn't really get. When she heard it, she said, it's not really what I want. She slept on it, and then she got it, and the producer and everyone else was totally correct. That is a killer solo on this record, and pushed this album to the stratosphere. All the records, she went back to Asylum with Peter Asher, who produced all these records, and had a successful string of hits on here. A lot of covers for the most part. The title track is an Anne McGarrigle track, Heart Like a Wheel. Beautiful, folky country, Faithless Love, the beautiful J.D. Souther, part of that whole LA scene as well. When Will I Be Loved, a great version of the Everly Brothers song. And again, probably maybe the definitive version of Willin', the Lowell George song, a song that Little Feat recorded twice. Once on their first album, re-recorded a second version on the second album, because the first album, he injured his hand, and Ry Cooder plays the bottleneck on that first version, on the first Little Feat album. A good country rock album. And this rocks. When she was able to rock with the band and musicians she worked with, she rocked. And of course, going back to that Eagles thing, she basically invented the Eagles. She pulled that band together to back her up. And I admire her, because when they decided they wanted to go on their own, she didn't get selfish and say, no, you can't leave me, how dare you. She supported the Eagles, and they became, earlier on, even bigger than Linda Ronstadt. But 1974's Heart Like a Wheel, a perfect country rock record. And really, this has kind of epitomized that kind of scene in Los Angeles in the 1970s. I think you can't get through 70s in LA with not mentioning Steely Dan. People love Steely Dan, or people dislike the slickness of Steely Dan. And I actually like Steely Dan. I can get tired of them. I worked for ABC when Asia came out, in that period after the greatest hits, the double one came out. But this is the one that really sucked me in. And to me, to this day, this is my favorite Steely Dan album, because this is the closest, I think, to a true rock band album, where everything else is pieced together by a lot of session musicians. They were pretty much of a band here. But Reelin' in the Years, the two songs, Reelin' in the Years and Do It Again, are to me perfect records, perfect recordings, perfect singles. I think this is recorded in LA at Village Recorders, and produced by Gary Katz. A fantastic record. When they're actually a working band, you can see them on the Midnight Special on YouTube, recordings of that great Danny Diaz guitar playing on this, which is, again, spectacular stuff. A perfect record, and to me, it's my favorite, and I think their best record, bar none. Now, this next record, I was toying the idea of including this because I think it's a fantastic record, but half of it was recorded at Wally Heider's in San Francisco, and half of it was recorded in LA, but they're essentially the LA thing, and this is Deja Vu, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. 71, I think this came out. Oh, Dallas Taylor and Greg Reeves as well. There, the rhythm section. This is the great combination. As much as I like the Couch record, and I do like Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, Marrakesh Express, that's 1969, by the way, so I couldn't have included it if I wanted to. This, to me, is a special album. That opening track that David Crosby wrote, Carry On, with the way that's written and the time signature, is really unusual for these LA bands at the time. That's not Steely Dan. It's not just pure country rock folk music. This is a brilliant album. Again, a lot of stuff goes into this. Neil Young is only on half the songs, but I like that addition of Neil Young. It adds this kind of validity to it. Not that Crosby and Nash aren't valid at all, but Neil Young, obviously they needed another great musician because all they had is pretty much Steve Stills playing everything on the records, and you get another guitarist, Neil Young. You get Helpless on here, which is a brilliant song. Teach Your Children, that's on here, right? Yeah, nice, but even Almost Cut My Hair, is as silly as those lyrics are. The searing guitars on that is intense. It's really good. Fantastic album. Deja Vu. Wait, If I Can Only Remember My Name, but that was recorded in the Bay Area. Deja Vu. If I Can Only Remember My Name, but that was recorded in the Bay Area. See what I did there? Coming at number 3, and the album that kicked the idea to do this video, kicked off the idea for me. I was playing this the other night, and this is The Doors' LA Woman. This particular one, just to tell you why it's not cellophane and glossy, this is a double 45 acoustic sounds version, which is really stupendous. This is probably their best sounding record, but this is a brilliant record. But I think there are a couple weak tracks on this record. I prefer their first 2 records, definitely, but this is obviously, LA Woman is perfect for a 70s record about Los Angeles, 1971. Their last record with Jim Morrison, certainly. There are a couple tracks in there that are almost standard blues things that I think that are kind of wasted. It'd be great to hear that kind of stuff live, but on this record, it's not great songwriting. But you got The Challenging, which is a kind of a cool opener, and the first single off the record, Love Her Madly, is a great 3-minute plus single, very commercial, probably written with that in mind. But you got LA Woman, 7 minutes, just under 8 minutes, which just builds and builds and has this kind of jazzy feel to it. I just love the drive in that song. And again, this version sounds the best I've ever heard it, but every version of this record, I think sounds pretty good, damn good. The other 2 songs, which I think are perfect songs on this album, are The Wasp, Texas Radio and the Big Beat, and of course, that kind of jazzy Fender Rhodes tinkling on Riders of the Storm, and with the actual sounds of rain and storm rains that ends the album. The Doors, number 3. My second favorite 70s Los Angeles album is the Asylum self-titled debut from Warren Zevon. Now, he did an album prior to this a few years earlier, which is not very good, but this is the one, produced by Jackson Browne. So Jackson Browne is all over. This epitomizes that whole LA scene. This is Warren Zevon really writing about the dark side, the noir side of Los Angeles in the mid-1970s. Of course, this is 1976. This came out, but you have, everyone, it's seemingly everyone who was in the music scene in this kind of country rock, LA polished scene seems to be on here. David Lindley, Waddy Wachtel. You got Phil Everly of the Everly Brothers. You got Jackson Browne and John David Souther. The thing is, you got these other great vocalists like Everly and Souther and Stevie Nicks and Bonnie Raitt supplementing that gritty sound of Warren Zevon's voice. His voice isn't a perfect voice. That's what I love. I like vocalists like him and Dylan and Springsteen that don't have perfect sound, but he is a brilliant piano player and songwriter and arranger. Does his own orchestrational scores. You got Lindsey Buckingham on harmonies. You have Glenn Fry and Don Henley harmonies. You have Bobby Keys on saxophone, who played with the Stones, and Harrison and Lennon. And And you got, let's see, who else you got? Jorge Calderon, who played with a lot of Warren, good friend of Warren Zevon. Bonnie Raitt and Rosemary Butler. Um, Carl Wilson. So the great harmonies. This is a very cinematic record. This is a very, this is the American West in a way, but not as a cowboy country record. You have that Aaron Copland-like orchestration that Warren Zevon is so good. You have his biting, historical, esoteric lyrics on here. This is a perfect record. Yeah, more people know Excitable Boy and the harshness of that and the big hit, Where Was the London? But I think this is the better record of the two. The original pressing sounds so good. Warren Zevon coming at number 2. Just a wonderful record. Frank and Jesse James, Hasten Down the Wind, another song that Linda Ronstadt would record. Poor, Poor Pitiful Me, another song Linda Ronstadt would record. The French Inhaler, She Said So Long, Norman, great song. Mohammed Radio, Carmelita, Desperados, Under the Eve, and of course the song Join Me in LA with the great build-up of background vocals by Rosemary Butler and Bonnie Raitt. So good, so good. This could have been my number 1 record. But my number 1 record, and I had to look this up because for some reason I thought of this right off, but I thought, oh, this is definitely Northern California, but it's not. This is Neil Young, After the Gold Rush. This is absolutely my favorite Neil Young record. Recorded in LA, so that's why it's included here. It's great photographs by Joel Bernstein. Harvest was his big breakout, the one after this. But to me, this is a better album. Tell Me Why, After the Gold Rush, Southern Man, with, again, searing guitar playing. Oh, Lonesome Me, beautiful song. Don't Let It Bring You Down. Cripple Creek Ferry. I just, Neil Young and Crazy Horse, pretty much everything they do I like. Obviously, some better than others. Prolific artist, cantankerous, and sort of he starts things and pulls back and kind of teases you in a way. But I just think, look at that photograph by Joel Bernstein. This is a perfect record. This is my number 1 record from the 1970s LA scene. Again, the punk thing is not really happening yet. No, it's no prog in Los Angeles, really, that I know of. They're probably minor albums. All these records, I'm sure you probably know every record here, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. So it's not any groundbreaking hipster list that has to be off-center. These are the records that people were listening to for the most part in the 1970s. Yeah, the record business was pushing these records, but they were fucking great records. So that's it. It's a long video, but it's music and Los Angeles, and I love LA.